Welcome to the MYBcast, a channel offering podcasts devoted to the art and science of somatic touch therapy. Somatic touch therapy is an alternative for self-care that recognizes the important role the body plays in our day-to-day life. We are fascinated with the mind-body connection, and so are the people we talk with. From pioneers who helped to originate or develop this work, to seedlings of somatic mindfulness who have adopted principles of this work in their massage practices, our guests will uplift, educate, and inspire you. Thanks for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. Now let's join our hosts.
Welcome back to another episode of Portraits of the Pioneers. My co-host Anna Marie Bowers and myself are going to be working on a series of episodes for the next 4 episodes, talking about building your own self-care network. We're going to be talking about what is self-care, what are the alternatives out there other than the medical model that we're all used to, and why many people are exploring alternatives to what has been the norm for many, many years. And to take us through this journey, we're blessed and honored to have Dr. Mark Hoch to join us. Mark is a medical doctor, finished his residencies in 1991 as a family medical practitioner. The thing that really interests me is the fact that he, from there, went into many different directions, one of which is the American Board of Integrated Holistic Medicine. He was one of the first group of doctors back in 2000 to participate in this new group of practitioners and was the president of that for a number of years. He's a certified Traeger practitioner, so he certainly understands somatics. He's also a Qigong master, so he has a sense of Chinese medicine, and he's also worked with a master's of divinity in spiritual healing and counseling. So I would consider Mark a very well-rounded healer who happens to be an MD. So Mark, welcome to the show.
All right. Thank you, Richard and Anna Marie. I'm really glad to be here.
Glad you're here. Thanks a lot. Can you tell us a little bit more about the American Board of Holistic Medicine?
Yeah, sure. Actually, for me, before that, when I was how I got into all that, when I was a medical student, it just seemed strange to me that there was really very little talk about health. Everything was managing diseases and diagnosing diseases, but nothing really about health. And I was able to find the American Holistic Medical Association, as it was originally called, back in 1986 and joined as a student, and then was on the board for 9 years, and then became president in 2002, 2003. And as part of that movement, one of our founding members of the Holistic Medical Association, Bob Anderson, started to create a board of holistic medicine, so it would be a medical specialty. And as part of that, we had many conferences, and then there was an entire curriculum that people had to master before they could be certified. And then we had a whole exam that with a whole test that was actually reviewed by professional testers to make sure that it was actually measuring what we wanted to measure. And then the board was launched in the year 2000. I was we call them the founding diplomates. That's a funny word, but I was one of the first people involved with that. And then I also was a reviewer for the course and taught not only at our medical conferences, but I taught some classes at the board review courses and reviewed some of the questions and topics in the curriculum, that in particular in the areas that I had expertise in. And then, made sure we were making sure that the test questions were validated so we can do that. And then later it morphed into the American Board of Integrative Holistic Medicine, as that word integrative medicine kind of caught on. So
and does that still exist right now, Mark?
Yeah. So that still does exist.
And how big of a group of practitioners are there?
That's a great question. There's many hundreds, and now we've expanded it. Originally, it was just MDs and DOs back in 2000, but now the group is open to health professionals in a whole variety of fields, which is really exciting. So it's expanded quite a bit.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit as you started your practice and you found yourself moving into this direction of holistic care, and that became part of your practice. How did you go about building that? How did you go about
Yeah.
finding your space in the healing world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. So it was important because I really did have to do that. So the two avenues I started out with, one was working, studying with all the doctors in the American Holistic Medical Association, and some of them are like Norm Shealy and people know Chris Northrup, Bernie Siegel, Bob Anderson, I mentioned, and one of my favorites of all time is Gladys McGarry, who just passed away a little over a year ago at the age of 103, and she was pretty much going all the way to the end. I was, really love working with Gladys. So going to the conferences, I started actually going even as a medical student. And then when I decided to do my specialty training, I chose family medicine because it had the broadest outlook, and it did include some aspects, like the even at that time it was called the biopsychosocial model, and that was very much included in the training. So we work with therapists and we looked at family systems and the communities that people were living in and how the health of the community was affecting the health of the people living there, and that was great. So, and I picked a program that was very strong in that with the University of Connecticut. That was what they were really known for, and that helped. And then I started a group. It used to be called the Greater Hartford Health Association, because that's where the residency was, and just started networking with people, chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists, physical therapists, people in a variety of different fields, so we could all learn what each other were doing and educate ourselves, but also know what's out there to help the people that were coming to see us. Because if we didn't have the mojo, or if I wasn't the best person for somebody, it was great because I knew who to send them to. Or if I was stuck on something, I could send them to the acupuncturist or someone else who had a different perspective or a different tool in their toolbox. And that wound up later becoming a state organization. And over time, I've done things like that in other places, like which I can talk about, including in Arizona. Yeah.
That's awesome. How did you put that information out for individual people to think about that idea of self-care? I mean, a lot of us think that self-care is noticing that you have a problem, calling your doctor and taking the medication that they give you. Um, and I think we're talking about a little bit broader definition of self-care. Maybe you want to help us out with what you think that is, what you
Yeah,
define that. Yeah.
yeah, sure. And some of that, um, I come, I know Richard likes this word too, the word real. I'm a realist, it's like, what I mean by that is, you want to be well trained, but book knowledge or scholarly knowledge will only get you so far. You have to, experiential knowledge. And I, I like to call it a lived experience, which to me is more than that. And there really wasn't a lot of self-care. It's like you go, you get this vaccination, you get this medication, you get the screening test, but it's like the screening test is like, if you already have a fatal disease, they're going to find it earlier than later. It's like, that's not really care. It's disease management,
Right.
and so through my study of the martial arts, that's what got me into Chinese medicine, aside from meeting some really cool acupuncturists. Um, there's just a framework of health in the classical Chinese medical system, which has been around for thousands of years. And there are many other traditions, Ayurveda and places around the world, in Tibet and other places where we have these traditions that have been around for a long time that do have a health-based thing. And any good, even spiritual practice, there are things that you do, whether, they might frame it to be closer to the divine, but it's like these are things that you do to take care of yourself and your spirit, but they also help your community. For example, I just went to, one of my friends passed away, went to the funeral, and it was so beautiful how everybody showed up, setting everything up, including filling in the grave, and then just making sure the family's okay, bringing food, checking on their emotional well-being, praying together, whatever it was. But that you got to create those things. The community has to take care of itself, just like a family has to take care of itself. Otherwise, if you're always looking to get resource from outside, it doesn't really work.
It doesn't work. Exactly. That's the bottom line. It doesn't really work. And if you don't have a broad community in your own personal life and you're just trying to manage all of this yourself, you need to build a network of some kind for your health and well-being too. Once you've decided that you want to pay attention and have some kind of personal responsibility for your own health care, then you want to try to find some people who will help you with that goal in mind of improved quality of life.
Right. And I love that word responsibility, because, if you break it down, it's like your ability to respond to what's really going on. We think of it as something like a weight on our shoulders, but, that's how our health works. Whatever's going on in the environment, our innate wholeness, our innate health, that different traditions have different names for it. But it's always recalibrating and going back, whether you want to use the word homeostasis or going back to health, going back in the right direction. Like you get a cut, if you don't bleed to death, it heals. You don't have to, 5,000 years ago, you didn't, or your dog doesn't, it cuts its paw, it doesn't go, on the internet to find out, oh, what am I supposed to do to take care of my foot? It just heals. But if we're healthy and we keep ourselves healthy, it's going to heal faster. And if we get smart and know not to put dirt in it or not to overuse it, it's going to heal faster and better.
Right.
Yeah.
And the human body is such an amazing machine. It's constructed with such redundancy also, so that if something fails, you've got a backup in the human body. And so exploring all of these different, for lack of a better word, modalities or professions or ways of taking care of yourself has been valuable to me in terms of learning what is happening with me and where's my ability to respond to this, and do I need to reach out to someone else who can show me a little bit deeper or further way of health and healing.
Right. Exactly.
So in the before we actually started the recording, we were talking about how community comes together, and we were talking about, well, I have my farmer that I get my vegetables from. I've got the local person who's raising chickens and cattle and that sort of thing, and that's where I'm getting my meat from, and so forth and so on. So this is really an old concept of community that somehow medicine, the medical community, particularly here in the Western world, has not really followed it. And if they have followed it, they follow it in a way that is kind of inside their own network. It's being driven by insurance companies that are dictating what they're going to pay for and who they're going to pay for and not, which I guess ties the hands of practitioners, doctors that want to do the right thing, but you know what? It's difficult to do it when you got too many cooks in the kitchen. And the idea of the person who needs the help, you, the individual, you're the captain of this body, and you got to take ownership to that. Yeah. And the whole purpose of these episodes that we're doing right now is to talk about, how do you do that? I mean, where do you start? Where do you come into a place where are there other people doing this? Are they successful? Where do I even begin to finding it? And these are things we're going to talk about in the different episodes. But we've also done a couple of episodes on Portraits of the Pioneers with you in the past. And one of the things that I was very fascinated with was one of the clinics you started up in I think it was in the Arizona or, yeah. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, because that seems to me like you really went out on the edge, created something that really worked. And all our conversations, Mark, it works. And I don't want to deal with things that don't work. So tell us a little bit about that clinic, how it started and where it went.
Yeah, sure. And then we can go back into the, the how do you do it for yourself kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
through the Holistic Medical Association, I think I found out about this project. It was probably through Andrew Weil, but he was in Arizona, in Arizona, in Tucson, but this was in Phoenix. And Sam Benjamin was a doctor who was trying to get this clinic started in Phoenix. And I went out there, it was a little bit crazy, some people think, because, we had a newborn baby. I was living in Connecticut. My daughter was less than a year old. She was born in January. I think we moved out there like in September. Um,
Mhm.
and my wife and I, my daughter, and we helped start this clinic from scratch. We were originally working at a Sam's office, but he was able to get a bunch of resources together, and there was a we even had some connection with the journal. It used to be called Alternative Therapies and Healing, that Larry Dossi and a few other people had started. So we were connected with them also. But so we were like, okay, what's needed? We need good protocols. We need people who can deliver them, but we also need a space and a culture to be able to effectively deliver the care. So we actually hired some architects who were expert at designing healing spaces. We got this building, we gutted one floor completely and just started from scratch, and just the walls were different colors, and we had amazing healing artwork, and there was a flow of moving through the space. So there was a beautiful waiting room, but then when people came to the back, it was still welcoming. It wasn't this like clinic with bright white lights and totally sterile feel. Everyone was trained to greet people and come from a good heart space, and it was just a joy to work there. We worked really hard, and but it was just fun,
Mhm.
partly from that perspective. And then I was the lead physician, and I was also the chair of the clinical practice committee. So we wound up hiring people. We had family doctors, we had an internist, we had doctors doing medical acupuncture. We hired a naturopathic doctor, which was pretty radical back then, because we're talking like 1994. We're talking over 30 years ago. We had a fully trained uh, Pam Wallach, who was fully trained in classical Chinese medicine, acupuncturist, Chinese herbalist. We had wellness classes for people. They could learn about different topics, whether it was dietary things or exercise. We had yoga, we had Qigong and Tai Chi classes. We had a really high level therapist there that both did healing groups, that also did, psychotherapy with people. And then the other thing that was really cool is we were fully integrated with an insurance company that cared about the people who were coming to see them. And we also were fully integrated. It was called Mercy Integrative Health. But it was more integrative in the sense that we were integrated with the hospital system, and that, that's what they meant by that, and the insurance system. But it worked because everybody was really looking out for the best interests of the people coming in, and they wanted it to work. And even, the insurance company was interested in that. I can tell you about the finances and how that worked out positively. But one story I like to tell, I had this one woman who she would just hardly ever do her self care. And actually, I worked with her, and one of the things I did was Traeger, because she had a lot of musculoskeletal problems. And I remember in her annual review, I was talking to the nurse manager, and I was like, Sandy, so and so, I'm not so sure about her. She like never does her homework, blah, blah. And then it was really funny. Just imagine somebody at an insurance company in a management position saying this to you as a doctor. It's like, no, Dr. Hope, you just don't understand. Before she came to see you, the year before that, she saw 13 different medical specialists. She went to the emergency room 12 times. And in the last year, she's the happiest she's ever been. She has seen no specialist, and she only went to the emergency room once. So you just keep doing whatever you're doing, and we will just keep paying you. Can you imagine that?
Wonderful.
Because
Wow.
it cut the cost. The person was happier and healthier. You cut the cost of care dramatically, and it was working. You know, so that's an extreme example, but there are many of them.
How do we get more of those? I mean, the purpose of
Yeah.
these episodes is to talk about self-care, and that's a self-care model that I would certainly sign up for. So, with that being said, there's a couple of keywords that you picked up that you described your clinic with. You surrounded yourself with good heart people, people that their heart was in what they were doing. And you know that when you're working with somebody that's just not calling it in, they genuinely care. You feel that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing is looking for the interest of the patient. It's not like, okay, I got a child I got to put through college and, I got to get as many procedures in so that I can get you know what I'm saying? That's not even in this formula here. So here we are in 2026. We've gone all different routes and downs. You're not in Arizona now. You're in Asheville, North Carolina. How do we create more of these? What does that look like? I mean, you've been an architect of something like this. Let's play. How do we design something like that?
Yeah, it's partly get, the level of the community interest.
Mhm.
And right now what I've done is more built a network without walls, with
Mhm.
people around. It's a little bit more rural here. So the city's got a solid 100,000 people or so, but I see people, from half hour, an hour in every direction. And I try to, know folks in all of those directions, but also just build a network here. But the bigger thing is it's really the will of the individual person, because we'll talk about this too, how each person can help build their own network to find what they need for themselves. um, that helps because then the practitioners start talking with each other. There needs to be a willingness across the professions, which I think there is more now than there used to be. And then it also, interesting enough, it also has a lot to do with the community. In some communities, we've had some challenges here because like some of the powers that be who, some old power structures don't like that idea, so they didn't make it so easy to do stuff like that here. Unlike what we experienced in Arizona, they still did it, but and the good news is there's some universities now that are much more open to this. There's a couple places in Southern California in particular, but that's going to really help as well. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, in the old days, people would come to see me kind of as the person of last resort. They've been everywhere. They were running out of money, running out of time and health. You know, and there was a little bit of desperation. Now people are in general, much more aware. So they're like, this other stuff isn't working, and they don't wait till they have some death-defying illness or debilitating condition, and they're like, I want to be healthy. So that's a big driver, the general population, and just seeing how the systems are falling down. It's just too expensive and it doesn't work. The problems I have with our healthcare system, I say there's two problems. First of all, there really wasn't a lot of health in it, and now there really isn't a lot of care. It's like we have the most expensive system in the world, and we rank like what 36th in quality. That's really bad. If you want to spend a lot of money and have the best thing and make it work great, okay, I'm cool with that. But if you want to spend a ton of money and have it be an abject, miserable failure, I don't get it. And a lot of people are in that place now. They're like, this is not working for me. So I think it's ripe now, the time.
Yeah, I would agree. And medical debt is one of the largest problems that families have in North America and America. Medical debt is responsible for, families having not only just financial difficulties, but sometimes medical debt actually ruins families. It ruins relationships. It's the cost of childcare, the cost of adult care, all of these things. So yeah, I think the time is right. And looking at it as a medical as a financial model, the cutting the cost, that information just needs to be out there in a bigger way, I think. Are there some studies that have been done?
Yeah, I mean there are some studies, and when we were in Arizona, like that woman was one example, but most of the people actually did really engage in what they were doing. And what they found was, after about a year, the average cost went down by like 57%. And even the people who had the poorest health and the highest utilization of care, we still cut the cost by about 47% in a year. And that's one example. I mean, you think about it, somebody just not, they're feeling better and they're not going to see all these specialists and keep showing up in the emergency room when they weren't getting any better from any of that stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's huge. That's just 1 year. And then, long term, just imagine if you're happy, healthy, more functional, you're going to work longer, be able to support your family better, but you're also going to be able to pay taxes longer and be able to be a functional member of society longer, as opposed to somebody else needing to care for you. So,
Mhm.
it just it just keeps paying off,
Right, exactly.
and I love just seeing some of my colleagues like Dr. Gladys. I don't know when she finally stopped practicing medicine, but she was at least 99, if not not 100. And it's like, and her brother and sister, same thing. They were still working. Brother was a doctor working full time as a doctor in Afghanistan at age 94. That's the last time I was tracking him down. And her sister was working as a nurse at age 92, like,
Mm-hmm.
and doing great things for the community.
And
You
by
know,
community, I'm just going to drill down a little bit. You're talking about community. Some of our listeners might live in a city of 1 million people. What are you talking about with that word community? Some people live in a rural area where they might have to drive 30, 45 minutes for their basic medical care, let alone if they were trying to do anything with massage therapy or Qigong or Traeger or anything else that might not exist anywhere nearby. So by
Hmm.
community, can you just kind of explore that concept a little bit?
Yeah, I was speaking more broadly there, not just the health the health professional community or the healing environment community, which is very important. And I think that's one of the key things, I think, for a healthy society. If you want to use that word as the broader um, picture, just like you need people growing food and you need people building infrastructure and housing, and and those sorts of things. So part of it is that aspect of the culture actually serving the culture to help everyone thrive. And that's one of the ways we do that. And then, right, then the other part of the community, it's like the unity together, the co-unity, um, is all of us working together. Like, in one of the things I love in Asheville, now we have such a food crisis in this country, with most of the things that people eat are not even real, they're not even food, let alone just bad food. There's full of dye and artificial this and GMO that. But here you have people on every aspect of that working the land, growing amazing vegetables or fruits, and other farmers, and I know my fish guy and I know my butcher and I know, I just know the delivery people, and we support them to help get organic food to people even who can't get out of their home, so it gets delivered to their house. And they were had that fully integrated, even with a group that was getting it to people who couldn't afford it. There were grants that were just giving this food free to people who couldn't even afford to buy it. That's amazing, because
Yeah.
that's like really taking care of everyone. Just like we want to take care of every part of our body and our being, we want to take care of everyone in the community, whether they have all the finances or not, or the means. And some people just can't do stuff. They have disabilities or whatever. Yeah.
that's amazing. That's music to my ears, to the fact that there is an alternative, because we need an alternative. And closing up this particular episode, the point that I really want to get across is this is not woo-woo. This is not, witch doctory or anything like that. Um, there's a little story that maybe we could talk about, that, how medicine actually shifted, at the turn of the 20th century. There was holistic medicine that was very much part of what medicine was. And the fact that, a major infusion of super wealthy people setting up the universities to create a network that was pretty much the environment that we deal with right now, it's taken us onto a different path. And the fact is that the idea here is it's health care. We're talking about health, we're talking about food, we're talking about the people that are caring for you. How do we get back to that? And how do people feel comfortable that there's a possibility that this, in fact, could be something that could work for them?
Great question. And I always like to talk about two things which tie perfectly into that. The first one is intention. You have to have the right intention. And part of that is knowing what's right and what's good, and hopefully I was fortunate. I get, good start, with my family, but also I just, also learned, you just always hang out with ethical, moral people. It's always going to turn out a lot better. And smart people are actually, but
simple advice.
The masters of the obvious.
Yeah, no, exactly. And actually that's a term that my friends and I in college use, because like stupid things be happening all the time, and and we're saying we're not like necessarily the most brilliant people. We're just motos, MOTOs, masters of the obvious. Like, it's obviously that's ridiculous. We're not going to do that. We're obviously, that's really cool. We hadn't thought about it. Let's consider it and see how we can make that work. So there's that curiosity piece too, but part of it is that it's like wanting to do it, knowing that it's possible, and then keep working towards it. And then the second one is paying attention. And that speaks to your saying the path got diverted. And it's knowing when you're off the path, you don't want to fall, like around here. If you get off the path, you're going to fall off the mountain. That's really bad and dangerous, because you could fall really far. But the same thing if you're driving your car, if you start going off the road, as soon as you feel your tire go off the road, you just steer back on the road. You don't like wait until you hit a tree or drive in the lake or run somebody over before you're like, oh yeah, probably should get back on the road. So you got to be paying attention. So I always talk with my clients too, like if something isn't working, you have to say, you have to notice that yourself, but also let me know, because something might work for 95% of people, maybe it doesn't work for you. And if it's not working for you, we don't want to keep doing it. Or if you notice something when we're doing some hands-on treatment in your body, like I can discern a lot of things, but I can't feel what you're feeling, and let me know. And sometimes people will say, oh, this weird feeling over here. And then we go there and all of a sudden it, like I had this woman, her kidney was out of place and it just like clunked right into place because she had the awareness and she said, what about this? And I went over there, and then, that was the healing. And it happened because she was paying attention to what was going on in her body, and, and wanted to know about it. And that's important. You have to ask questions, and it's okay to do that. If somebody says something that doesn't make any sense, or like, you're like, well, that sounds really dangerous. Like, just because they're a professional or the expert, don't listen to them. There are plenty of political leaders, there are plenty, whatever, like, if it's not right, don't do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Introception is definitely something that's becoming more and more, people are becoming aware of it. Take a scan of yourself. You can do that. You can take a moment, stop the noise around you, and just focus on what you're feeling inside your body and identify with that, and let your body start to talk to you saying, hey, we got a problem here. This is what's going on. And everybody's got that built in it comes with the program. It comes with the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's hardwired, software. It's in there. Yeah. And we have, and just to be aware of that, because too many times we're taught by the media or educational institutions, this is the way it is, and maybe one distinction that might be really helpful in this discussion to close this out, or if we have more to go, is I always make a really strong point of the distinction between a label and a diagnosis, because too often things are labeled as something, and then people think just because someone named it, that's what it is. Like, for example, like the Rockefellers changes got us into this medical industrial complex thing in 1919, with their big Rockefeller Institute report that came out then, and that's what then they were like, okay, let's get rid of all the homeopaths. Let's try to destroy the osteopaths. Let's get rid of all the herbalists, because we have these chemicals that are going to do this and we can make a lot of money. And then unfortunately, a lot of people bought into that, versus like with your health or even with life, the word, people get lost. The word diagnosis has a real meaning. Way, and gnosis, knowing, way of knowing what is really going on, and that's what we need to pay attention to. Just like you talked about, use that word interoception. How is it feeling in us? How is it landing in us? What's our perception of what's really happening versus what someone else told us, which might even be like I said, sometimes it's right for someone else, but it might not be right for you. And then other times it's probably not right for anybody. But, and that's where we have to be careful. Like, how do you know what's going on, and learning how to do that? Because that's how you build your self-responsibility and your self-care. Because if you're really caring for yourself, you have to know what's going on for you, which might be very similar to other people and sometimes very different. And then that's the only way you're going to be able to navigate to the best place, is to start where you are, but really start where you are, not some fantasy where you are, what somebody else told you where you are, or what somebody else labeled where you are. It's like what's really going on right now, so then you can respond appropriately. So
that's excellent advice. And I'm going to encourage our listeners to Google or just do some research on the Rockefeller medicine. There's plenty written about it, and you'll get an understanding. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. You'll understand where the curtain is and where we are and how we got there. Okay. It's good. Everybody should have an understanding of where we came from with our medicine. And the second thing that I think is really important that we talked about in this past half hour is the fact that this is medicine that goes back thousands of years. You mentioned acupuncture, Tai Chi, moving of chi, energy. Everything is energy, everything. And how it moves through our body impacts how we heal ourselves, how we function. These are fundamental principles that work. And we want to talk more about that in our next series. I think we're going to close this particular episode off, and I'm going to ask you to join us again for episode 2 with Mark. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what is a network and how do you go about building your network. So, Anna Maria, I'm going to let you take us out of this episode and invite us back to the next one. And Mark, thank you so much for your time. I love talking to you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great to be with you as always.
Cool.
I don't think I have anything to add. That's great. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at MYBcast. We hope you found the stories inspiring. This series has been made possible by our hosts, our production team, and our guests, whose willingness to share their personal stories is vital to educating the public about the power of somatic touch. We're all contributing to creating positive change. Thanks to our sponsors, Mind Your Body, the Foundation for Somatic Touch, and Somatic Mindfulness. Find them on the web at myb.llc. foundationforsomatictouch.org and somaticmindfulness.co. Please like, share, subscribe, and join us again for more interesting, compelling, and heartful stories.